conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And welcome, everybody, to another amazing day right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I hope you guys are having a great week and hope you're staying safe, too, with the snow. I don't know if there's still snow on the ground by the time you're listening to this, but this was certainly recorded in the snow. And I tell you what, it's pretty snowy out there. But welcome, though, to the show today. If you're listening to this on radio, on TV, you can head over to theandrewshow.com if you want to catch the podcast version of this. It's essentially the same, except it has a little less breaks, a little more continuity to it, because today I'll be talking about a few issues, but we'll also have on Congressman Thomas Massie. We'll be on for about 20, 30 minutes here today to talk to us. He's obviously in a contested primary. A lot of money being thrown around, and a lot of things being said. So I will take a time to ask him those questions, because obviously I see online, you see online, we all see it. Maybe you don't, maybe you do, I don't know. But we do see, I see at least, people, levying the common accusations of calling him a RINO, lumping him in with McConnell, saying he's got Trump derangement syndrome, so on and so forth. So I want to ask him, does he hate Trump? Does he have Trump derangement syndrome? Why does he do what he does? Well, I will ask him those questions today, so make sure you stay tuned in to that. Also, big deal coming out of the Ford battery plant. SK is cutting its losses. It's saying, never mind. SK is a South Korean battery manufacturer, saying, never mind, we don't want to be part of your little joint venture there anymore. We are leaving you. This comes, of course, on heels of a few other things going on there, so we'll talk about that as well. So we'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. If you want to, you can like, comment, share, subscribe. You can follow along here. Make sure you leave a review, but without further ado, let's dig down into it. So we have the Ford battery plant, and I'm starting with this. I know many of you probably expect me to start with the Sarah Stalker video. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it by now, the minute-long video of Sarah Stalker, representative out of Louisville, saying something absolutely ridiculous. A lot's been said about it already nationally. I was the first one to post it online, of course. And so obviously I'm aware of it as the person who let the world know about it. But maybe at the end here, I'll have some time to talk about it. But I think this battery plant situation is super important, because this is like a big problem for Beshear. So you may remember, people listening to the show know I have covered this topic in depth, because we have a $250 million plus disaster cooking. And from day one that this deal came out, I called it out as absolutely ridiculous. So back in 2021, during a special session, the legislature passed a piece of legislation that the Beshear administration had requested. So the Beshear administration set out this deal and said, hey, look, we got a big deal here. We got a big deal coming for you. This manufacturer wants to come to the area, and we're going to cut them one heck of a lot of cash. But don't worry, we're going to get a lot of jobs out of this. We promise it'll be the next Toyota. Every time now they do an economic development in Kentucky, it's the next Toyota. And so only 5 or 6 or 7 or so of the legislators were read into it. Basically, leadership on both sides of Democrats and Republicans in the House and Senate had to sign an NDA, and they agreed. But every other person who voted for this, other than the 7 or so that voted no, that were all Republicans, but there was only like 7 or so that voted no, all the rest of them had no idea what they were voting for. All they knew is they were voting to give $410 million to they didn't know who. And essentially the deal was cash money to Ford went $350 million in a cash money forgivable loan. $110 million went to a different battery plant down in Bowling Green that Beshear tried to tell us was a Japanese company. But of course, it was actually not a Japanese company. It was until it sold to the CCP to China. back in 2019, a few years before the deal was penned. So it was a Chinese company, and we gave $110 million to them to build a battery plant in Georgetown that has basically ceased operations. The way the contracts wrote, they have a reason to continue to pretend to do work there, but there's been a lot of layoffs and a lot of other issues going on. So that money's pretty much sunk. Good luck trying to go to the Communist Party and get your money back, right? Anyways, but a part of outside that $110 million, we also gave $350 million to Ford. We also gave them a free plot of land. We also gave them training programs and a few other things. So Beshear set up the deal, negotiated the deal, had the grand idea, but to be honest, it was a few members of leadership within the legislature that greenlit the idea and then convinced the whole rest of the caucuses to go ahead and vote yes on something without knowing who it was going to. This stinks for everybody around. Nobody has an excuse for it. They really don't. But regardless, and this battery plant has struggled. So they did get one open operating, but it's far below capacity. They promised 5,000 jobs here. They've got a few more years left to hit that target. I believe right now they're sitting right around like 1,500 maybe. I don't know for sure, but I've seen some comments that was saying they're around 1,500 or so. They're below capacity. I mean, in November alone, F-150 Lightning sales fell off 72%. So, I mean, electric vehicles are clearly struggling. And the second plant, because they built two plants there. Now, what's funny is people would say, well, you know, Ford, though, has put billions of dollars into these plants, right? Wrong. These plants were built from another taxpayer give out from the Biden administration that gave Ford over $5 billion to build a couple electric vehicle manufacturing plants and battery plants in the southern United States. So they got their money from the federal government to build the plants, and then whatever they were short on, well, you know, Kentucky kicked in the rest to cover it for them. So they pretty much got a free plant. So they figured, why not? Let's go for it. Let's do it. Well, it's not working out well. And so SK has left them and has said, look, we're going to take over this plant down in Tennessee we're joint on. We'll take that plant. You take this plant. Now, why is it that they would say Ford can take the plant here in Kentucky? And I believe it has to deal with leverage because, rewinding here, one, the other half of their plant, they built this other plant that they're probably not going to use. They're in talks with Nissan to have Nissan take it over and do its electric vehicle manufacturing there. We'll see. But the key thing for Ford in Kentucky that SK doesn't have is leverage. Ford has leverage in Kentucky. Why? Because across its other factories here in Kentucky, it has just over 12,000 employees on top of of course, the auxiliary jobs that go into the factory, supplying and driving and all those other things that are supplying the parts to Ford. Ford has a lot of leverage to make it to where this $350 million they're given from the Kentucky taxpayer, they perhaps maybe never have to pay back. Because what happens when you go to them and say, I want our $350 million back? Because it's technically a forgivable loan as long as you hit job targets. If you miss those, you got to pay us back. So what happens? We go to them and say, pay us back. And they say, look, we'll pay you back. We'll pay you back in full. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our 12,000 plus jobs and we're going to go to a different state, because how we're going to make this money is we're going to go to a different state and offer them the 12,000 jobs. In return, we want them to give us land, build us a plant, and give us $350 million to pay back Kentucky. Now, you may say, that's impossible, Andrew. They'd never do that. But let me remind you, if Kentucky was willing to offer Ford $350 million in cash, plus free land, plus training programs, so total cost around $400 million, for what would be 5,000 jobs in a completely unproven industry, electric vehicles, what would they be willing to pay for 12,000 plus jobs that aren't going to be created out of thin air, like electric vehicle manufacturing would be? These jobs are being created somewhere, but are rather jobs that they're just transferring. You know, these 12,000 plus jobs already exist in Kentucky, and they're going to move them all somewhere else. How much do you think they'd definitely be willing to pay out? At least $1 billion. If we're willing to pay out around $400 million for or $250 million cash. Sorry, it was cash to Ford of $250, I believe, and then $350 million. So that was our all-in cost. I apologize. So we gave him free land, training programs, everything else. Total cost to us was around $350 million. $250 million cash. That cash is what they have to pay back to Kentucky. So they say, look, if you want to make us pay back the $250 million, fine. We're going to take our 12,000 jobs. We'll get $250 million cash from wherever we go to pay you back. Plus, they will give us a free plant and free land as well to move all of our jobs to. Easily that offer would come down. Because you also have, of course, the auxiliary jobs. They know how many auxiliary jobs this will create because they have it here in Kentucky. And so they threatened to do that to him. And what's Kentucky going to do? They're going to say, okay, we'll take it. Well, anyways, coming up after this, we're going to have Thomas Massie on the air with us. So stay with us here. We'll be back in a few short minutes. Congressman Massie, thank you so much for taking some time out here to talk with us today.
Hey, great to be on a Kentucky show with Andrew Cooperrider.
Well, obviously, currently you're in a contested primary. Contested. I think as far as spending goes, it'll be your most contested primary since you've been elected. Both sides are spending millions. Obviously, to the casual observer, this appears to be driven, frankly, by the president, not seeming to dislike you a fair amount. So in your opinion, why do you think President Trump is such a problem with you?
Well, when I talk to him on the phone, he calls me a tough cookie and a sharp cookie. You know, he says, you went to MIT. You know, my uncle, Professor John G. Trump, went to MIT. He taught there 41 years. It's a record. I've got the best genetics. So he knows I went to MIT. He knows he went against me before, and I got 81% in the primary. But on social media, he calls me Rand Paul Jr. now. I wish he'd call me Ron Paul Jr. Because I think Rand and I were mixed up at the hospital, and I'm really Ron Paul's son.
Well, you know, so why do you think, though, he's taken such issue with your votes, what you're doing there?
Well, it's not particularly about me, and so I'm not offended when he attacks me. What he's doing is attacking me to try to keep other people in line, and it's worked so far. Most of the Freedom Caucus has become a rubber stamp for whatever the president wants. Even when they disagree with him, they will literally tell me on the floor of the House that that I'm taking the right vote, but they just can't take that vote because they'll either lose their primary, or if they're running statewide for governor or attorney general or something else like that, which many of them are, they might draw his ire and he might endorse their opponent and it might cost him an election. So the reason he's attacking me on social media is to try to keep the rest of the conservatives in line, and so far it's working.
So for a while, the Trump side of things, they were looking for an opponent against you, like ferociously hunting. I mean, I know of people being reached out to. It's more than just a handful, and they even had a few people coming up to D.C. to try to court them, meeting with the president, trying to court them, and it still took them a little while to find an actual opponent to run against you. Why do you think it was so hard to get them to have somebody say yes? I know it wasn't a problem finding people they wanted to say yes, but they were having a problem getting those people to say yes to running against you. Why do you think they're having such a problem finding an opponent?
A few reasons. Number one, if you're not living in Kentucky, on paper, this looks like a race that's going to, that I could lose. And if I don't execute, if I don't get out there and campaign and I don't raise money, yeah, I could lose. But it's more likely, according to the prediction markets, there's two websites where you can go bet on my race. It's far more likely that I'm going to win, according to the people who put their money where their mouth is. You can go look up those prediction websites. I haven't looked at it this morning, but it was about 3-to-1 odds that I'll win. And I'm not going to get overconfident. Like I said, I still have to work hard. So I think a lot of people looked at this and said, do I really want to take the beating for the next 9 months of my life? That's them speaking, not me. And then also the proposition is sort of, it's dead on arrival if you think about it. If you've got any self-respect, what they're telling you is, we'll spend millions of dollars, and when we're done, if you get elected, you are going to have to vote to send foreign aid to every country we tell you, especially Israel. You can have no independent thought whatsoever on those topics. And all of the other topics, you're going to have to be completely in lockstep with the president, because if we make you, we can unmake you. So the proposition to anybody running was, do you want to go through this really tough race where it's long odds, and then you're going to come up here and become, basically a rubber stamp for the establishment, whoever the establishment is?
So, what's interesting is obviously in social media, and I do notice there is a age gap here. So, a certain generation tends to make these kinds of comments of saying, look, I've always supported Thomas in the past, Congressman Massie in the past, but recently it seems like he's more into grandstanding. He voted for Biden's budget, won't vote for Trump's budget. And we see those kinds of comments on, at least I do. Obviously, I'm active on social media and politics in Kentucky, so I probably see it more than your average person. But what's the truth to that? What's your response to that? That not getting anything done, you're only standing against Trump because you have Trump derangement syndrome, you're a RINO?
So, well, let's take them one at a time. By the way, most of those are anonymous comments from people, and a lot of those are people who don't even live in the congressional district. The predominant response that I see online from real people with real profile pictures and real names, or even better, real people at county fairs and Rotary clubs, is, you know what, Thomas, I don't always agree with you. Maybe I agree with you 80% of the time, but I know you're principled and I know you're fighting, and I would rather have you up there using independent thought to represent the constituents in Kentucky than to have a rubber stamp. That's the predominant thing that I hear, and that's what our polling bears out. Now, let's start with the claims, like you said, the one where you said he's not effective. Let me ask you, Andrew, what would be a measure of effectiveness in Congress?
Well, what they're typically pointing at, what they are using, not me, but what they would use is how many bills do you get passed? Okay,
great. Let's go by that metric. There have been 41 bills signed by the President of the United States this year. There are 535 legislators, okay? I am one of those, my legislation is one of those 41 bills. Okay, 41 divided by 535. I'm in the top 10%, maybe 8% of Congress in terms of getting bills passed. And until December, I was the only legislator from Kentucky to get a bill passed, whether it's a senator or a U.S. representative. I was the only person from Kentucky to get a bill passed by the time I got the Epstein Files Transparency Act passed. So if we're going by legislation, I think you got to acknowledge I'm in the top 10% of getting bills passed and signed by the president. What are the other metrics in terms of transparency and oversight? I've provided more transparency and oversight than anybody up here. I mean, I've exposed things going on at the FBI, at the Capitol Hill Police, things that NATO is doing, where our money's being wasted overseas. I was Doge before Doge was cool. I identified a lot of this waste that Doge found. And so if you're going by oversight, I think you got to give me the nod there too in terms of effectiveness. So I'm not sure what it is that they're saying, effectiveness should be. It is true that I didn't vote for the big bill, and I'll tell you why. It's because I've been consistent in the entire 13 years that I've been here. If you've got a bill that increases spending, I'm not voting for it. Just not going to do it. So that was the problem with the big, beautiful bill. We're Republicans. Why would we vote for a bill that increases spending?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, on that topic, though, they would point to, what people point to is, well, he voted for, I know it wasn't a Biden budget. I know personally that it was a debt ceiling increase, and I know there was a deal involved there. Can you explain your vote in the Rules Committee, too, as well, on that particular?
So last Congress, I didn't really want to be there, but I got myself in a point of high leverage. They had a hard time electing a speaker up here. There were people who were never going to vote for Kevin, and there were people who were always going to vote for Kevin McCarthy. And I told Kevin McCarthy himself, I said, I was barely Kevin all 15 rounds. But because I was in that position of not totally for Kevin, I hadn't committed my vote, but it could go either way. And also because I had been involved in leadership battles before up here, I helped broker the deal that got Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker. I did not want a position on the Rules Committee, but I ended up with a position on the Rules Committee. And it was a very pivotal position. It was basically the tie-breaking vote. And I used that position to get like 400 amendments made in order. In the less than a year that Kevin McCarthy was Speaker, I used the Rules Committee to make sure we had 72 hours to read every bill. Like they've, never before and never since, when Kevin was Speaker and I was on the Rules Committee, have we actually imposed the rule where you have to get 72 hours to read a bill. When they tried to attach things in the Rules Committee that weren't related to the bill, I would tell them I'm going to vote no, and they said, we need your vote. You're like a tiebreaker. And I said, all right, we'll take that crap out. I mean, there was abortion votes that I forced. They were trying to hide things in bills. They would try to, there was also this thing in the Rules Committee. Do you know you can pass a rule that makes an amendment pass itself without a vote of Congress? They're called self-executing amendments or self-executing legislation. I said, as long as I'm on this committee, you're not going to pull that trick. By the way, they're back to pulling that trick now that I'm not on that committee. And there was a very contentious debt limit fight. Again, it wasn't a spending bill. It wasn't a CR. It wasn't an omnibus. The question was, would we raise the debt limit? And I have always said that you can get my vote on any of these things, but my price might be too high for you. My price in the Rules Committee for voting to allow that to go through the Rules Committee, and by the way, if I had voted against it, they probably would have gone over to the Democrats and given them something and got them to vote for it. So you can only stretch this rubber band so far and still get something for it. So what I said was, I had this thing called the Massie plan, where that's what the congressmen up here call it. It's a 1% automatic cut if Congress fails to do its job. So instead of a shutdown, you get a 1% slowdown. And I've always been an advocate of that because it's the only way that you can really win. Would I rather cut 10%? Yeah. But if you make it 10%, then they're going to fight you tooth and nail when it comes time for that to enact. So I said, if we put an automatic 1% cut in the event that Congress does a CR instead of the separate bills, then I will vote for this debt limit increase. Now, what would it eventually do? It would cut the amount of debt that we undertake. I think the only legitimate way you could vote for a debt limit increase is if you extract in writing, in law, a mechanism to reduce the debt. And that's what I did. I made that trade in the Rules Committee. Now, what's interesting is the same people who say, oh, he voted for the debt limit increase. And by the way, I got something for it. They say, oh, he will never compromise. They're trying to play both sides of it. And you'll probably see, you might see my opponent do that. But by the way, since then, everybody has voted, except for me, for debt limit increases and gotten nothing for it except spending increases.
So going off a little bit from your election, obviously, I know you want to talk about that, but I do have something I wanted to talk about, which is, why does Congress suck? Because, hey, I mean, I hear it. The commentators, obviously, the national ones, everything else, we're looking at what Congress is getting accomplished, and we're not seeing much of even what was promised in Trump's election. We're not seeing the Doge cuts codified. We're not seeing a lot of the Trump executive orders that, personally, I like a lot of them being codified into law, so that way it's not so easy for Democrats to undo them. We're really not seeing much accomplished, and it just kind of frankly sucks. And
right.
I think it's going to lead to Republicans losing the House, because as Republican voters are watching this or listening to this, they might be thinking to themselves, why should I turn out to vote? It doesn't seem to matter.
Well, that's the problem. We're going to get in the midterms here, and people are going to be apathetic. The president, unfortunately, told everybody who believed him when he said he would release the Epstein files. He said, he switched and said, if you want to release the Epstein files, you're no longer my supporter. I don't want your support. The problem with that is 80% of Republicans wanted the Epstein files released, and the other 20% didn't care. Like, you can't tell your base.
I didn't think there was a contingent of voters that were like, I really don't want the Epstein
I want
files
to keep
released.
the pedophiles protected. There are some lawyers who make sort of academic arguments that grand jury material shouldn't be released, and that if you're a suspect and you've never been convicted, you shouldn't be convicted in the court of public opinion. But it's like less than 1% of the population. Okay, so why does Congress suck? Those were your words. That's your question.
Yeah, those were my words. Yeah, you don't have to agree with that opinion.
Let me tell you. First of all, they hate going on the record. Because if you go on the record, if you have to take a vote, like for instance in Venezuela, you could be happy that we're blowing up boats and taking seizing oil tankers, and maybe even think we should overthrow the government down there. But the reality is Congress has to vote on that. Like, the president can't do all that on his own, according to our Constitution. Even in the Middle East, we had an AUMF where Congress voted to allow that to happen. And other counterterrorism strikes are authorized by that AUMF. But what's going on in Venezuela is not authorized. So what are we doing next week? This is to all those people watching your podcast who think I'm ineffective. I'm forcing a vote on Venezuela. Now, maybe you want to attack Venezuela, maybe you don't, but hopefully you've read the Constitution and you know we can't do it without an act of Congress. And so I'm forcing Congress to weigh in next week. We'll see if that vote, if it's successful or not. But the vote will happen. And so Congress sucks because people want to go to their town halls without a voting record and say they're for the people in the town hall. And then they want to go to the lobbyists without a voting record and take their money and tell them they support the lobbyist position. And that's one of the reasons I draw the ire of the establishment up here. Is the thing I do more than anything is force votes. I forced a vote on the COVID relief package called the CARES Act that caused massive inflation, because I knew it was a terrible mistake to send all that money to the banks and Wall Street and pay people to stay home during COVID and to fund mail-in elections in all 50 states. I thought that could be a bad idea at the time. It turned out to be a bad idea. But they wanted to pass that with nobody even in Washington, D.C., and I forced them all to come back. So Congress sucks because they don't want to go on the record, and so mostly they stay out of things. Now, I'm actually hopeful, Andrew. Let's say there's 220 Republicans up here in the GOP conference in the House. 30 of them are just evil, scummy, bad dudes. They wake up every day and do the wrong thing, even if they could raise more money and get more votes by doing the right thing. They
look at Kevin Spacey's character on House of Cards as like a hero, not a villain.
Yes, exactly. They thought House of Cards was a DIY video, or how-to video, how to Congress. But here's the good news. There's only 30 out of 220 that are corrupt, on the take, or doing something evil. There are 30 that wake up every morning and try to do the right thing. Now, most recently, they've been, they go to school and their lunch money is stolen before noon. This would be the Freedom Caucus. They get up, they try to do the right thing. They want to do the right thing, even if it would cost them votes, even if it costs them fundraising. They're up here to do the right thing. What does that leave? 220 minus 30 minus 30. There's 160 Republicans up here running the same exact algorithm. Every single one of them are doing the exact same thing. What is it they're doing? They are following. They are just rubber stamping whatever is the slop of the day. And usually the slop of the day is coming from the 30 bad guys or enabled by the 30 bad guys, and it's coming from the lobbyists and the uniparty and the deep state. And the good news, Andrew, is Congress wouldn't suck if we got a speaker who would actually fight, who would codify into law the good things that Donald Trump is trying to do and resist through law the bad things that the uniparty is trying to do. If the 30 good guys could prevail and elect one of theirs as a speaker, it would change the course of history for this country if we could get somebody like Jim Jordan. Because the 160 who are just following, they would just follow Jim Jordan. They're not ideological. They just want to come up here and have a good dinner, get the good invites, take a few trips, and wear the pin on their shirt.
So, one thing I wonder, kind of watching what's going on and the going back to the sense of Congress sucks and everything else, is why do you continue to run? I mean, we see Marjorie Taylor Greene looking at it saying, this is way more trouble than it's worth, and I don't feel like can change anything. Why do you continue to kind of, just personally, it's definitely, regardless if people agree with you or not, the trials and tribulations that so publicly too you go through is not something people typically want to stay around for a very long length of time. But why do you stay up there?
Because I give people hope. And if I were to leave, I think a lot of people would lose hope. I've told our GOP conference chairwoman, I said, look, I might be the only no vote up here some days, but I represent, with that no vote, sometimes 30%, sometimes 70% of the Republican base. And if I don't cast that vote, there's nobody voting for them. And so don't get so mad at me if I'm taking a different position. I joke, by the way, this part is serious, this statistic, 91% of the time I vote with the Republican Party. But the 9% of the time that they're taking up for pedophiles or starting a new war or bankrupting the country, I'm going to be a no vote. So you got my vote 91% of the time because that's maybe how frequently you're doing the right thing. But in the 9% of the cases where you're doing things you explicitly said you wouldn't do in your campaigns, I'm sticking with the campaign promises, not with whatever slop you're trying to serve on that particular day.
So just kind of one final question for you here, because I know you had about 30 minutes here for us. So why should the people of the 4th District reelect you? What's your pitch to them of why they should continue to put their trust in you?
Well, you got a choice in this election. You can have a rubber stamp, which you could have somebody like the other 160 congressmen who are up here who just go along to get along. You could elect a rubber stamp. That would be my opponent. Or you can vote for me, and maybe we don't always agree, but I'm trying to do the right thing. Given all the information I have, I make the votes that I believe are the best, not for the Republican Party, not for the Freedom Caucus, not for any other group, not for the lobbyists, but for the people in Kentucky who I represent, the 750,000 people in Kentucky. And if you want an independent thinker, that would be me. And I've figured out how to get things done. I got the Epstein bill passed 427-1 in the House, 100-0 in the Senate, and the president signed it. And it took 5 months of siege warfare to get that across the finish line. But once I got across the finish line, it's like the quickest bill passage ever. The Senate passed it before it even got there. Once it passed the House, they took a unanimous consent vote to say that my bill would pass the Senate without ever being so much as read and go straight to the president's desk. And as soon as it landed on his desk, he signed it. So I do get things done. I will tell you the inconvenient facts about the bills. I do read the bills. I do try to make them follow the rules up here, like 3 days. We should have 3 weeks or 3 months to read a bill, but the rules say 3 days. When I'm in a position to do so, I enforce those rules because it brings more transparency and makes our republic work better. So that, and I've got good legislation, the Prime Act. I've got that actually in the text of the Farm Bill. If they could ever get the Farm Bill passed, there's a pilot program for the Prime Act in there. And what I'm doing is following the strategy that I used to get hemp legalized in 2014. That I took my hemp bill and we made a pilot program for hemp in the 2014 Farm Bill as an amendment. I'm doing the same thing with the Prime Act. The Prime Act, by the way, if you're watching this and you don't know what I'm talking about, it allows you local farmers to use a local processor and sell beef locally and pork without having to go to a giant USDA factory that's owned by a foreign country. And I'm getting that done, working on that, making progress, and got results. Don't confuse activity with progress. The people that call me a grandstander, what's interesting about that is a lot of congressmen won't go on TV. They wouldn't come on your podcast for 30 minutes and take any question you want to ask because they're not quite sure what they believe. And they're afraid they might get cornered. They're afraid you might ask a question for which they have no talking points. And if they don't know, they're afraid to tell you they don't know. If you ask me a question I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. But the reason you see me on TV is I mean what I say and I say what I mean, and I don't need my staff to tell me what I should think that day. I can do it in real time. So if you want that kind of representation, which I think is the kind of representation we need to make this country work in a republic, it's not a democracy. You got to put your faith in somebody. I'm asking the voters to put their faith in me again.
I know I said one more question, but you brought it up real quick. Is this hemp problem? I had Katie Moore on last week. We did an hour-long interview about it, and through that, she said 97.5% to 100% of the hemp crop in Kentucky will be illegal a year from now if what was in that CR passes. Is there a real movement up there to undo that, or do you have any insight into that?
The uphill battle there is there's not hemp lobbyists walking around here with money falling out of their pockets in congressional offices, which is how a lot of bad stuff gets done up here, or how anything gets done up here, unfortunately. And so it's just going to take a grassroots effort, congressman by congressman, senator by senator. And the tough part is they voted. I didn't vote for the hemp ban that they put in this most recent CR. That's like one of those slimy things they stick in there at the last second. And the 160 who go along to get along, and unfortunately the 30 who are trying to do the right thing, who are scared to do the right thing, they voted for that slop that got added in there, and they're going to have to admit that they made a mistake, unfortunately.
How many had no clue what they were even voting for? What the even ramifications were of it, right?
Right, because it didn't follow a legislative process. That was like thrown in there at the last second. If there had been, committee hearings on it, and if it had, been marked up in a committee, and there was debate in a committee, and then debate on the floor, and an amendment process on the floor, and if it was a standalone vote instead of being stuck to something it never belonged stuck to, then maybe the congressman would have known what they voted for. That's another reason people should support me. I knew what was in that bill. People say, why do you vote no so frequently? Because I read the bills. I know what's in it. And if I were on the Rules Committee this Congress, which I'm not, but I was last Congress, I would have fought it in the Rules Committee. you have Republicans failing you there in the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee should have never allowed that to be that hemp ban to be attached to it. So it's going to take some effort. Maybe it takes the states just ignoring what the feds are doing, like they've done it in some of the states on the marijuana issue and on other issues. Sometimes just non-compliance is the best way to get some movement on things.
Yeah, I understand. Well, thank you, Congressman. If people want to find out more about you or support your campaign, they can visit thomasmassie.com. Once again, that's thomasmassie.com, TOMASMASSIE, thomasmassie.com. Congressman Massie, thank you so much for carving out a little bit of time here to talk with me today.
Absolutely. And if you want to follow me on social media, on my official accounts, because I'm here speaking to you in that capacity, it's at Rep Thomas Massie. And I believe it's the same on Facebook as it is on Twitter. I encourage you to get on X. It's all censored, but it's the least censored on X, I believe. And that's the platform that's on my phone that I use, and I'm on there. I'll respond to comments and whatnot on that platform. I'm also on Facebook and being very transparent and telling you what's going on. So put notifications on, because sometimes this stuff happens in just a few hours and you may not have time to know about it until you read that it happened on the evening news. But if you're following my social media accounts, my official social media accounts from my congressional office, I'll let you know what's going on before they do the evil deed.
Well, thank you, Congressman. I hope you have a great rest of your morning.
All right. Thank you. You too, Andrew. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to thank the Congressman for giving us his time. One thing he did mention, that Primac, by the way, and he kind of glossed over it a little bit, so I wanted to let you guys know a little bit more about that. Basically, if during COVID you remember that our meat shelves were empty, but yet at the same time our farmers here in Kentucky, other places, were culling the herds. They literally had to kill the cows and the sheep and the pigs and things rather than sell them to the processors and put them on the shelf. So you have a meat shortage on the shelf, but meanwhile, farmers have so much livestock that they have to kill it off. What happened? Well, what happened was the processors were affected by COVID, whether that was because they decided to buy into the hype and close down or whatever. And these processors here in the U.S. here, there's 4 major meat processors. They're owned, only 2 of them are U.S. owned, I believe. I believe one's owned out of South America, one's owned out of China, or maybe 2 are owned out of China. But anyways, they process right around about 85-90% of the meat, especially in a state like Kentucky that doesn't have any state level regulations per se to allow it. So what happens is if you want to go, if you as an individual want to go buy a steak from your local farmer, you're not allowed to do that unless they take it to a USDA inspected processor. And there only are so many USDA inspected processors because these processors have to pay a very large amount of regulatory costs to the USDA for them to have an inspector out there on site. And it makes it to where unless you're moving enough stock, you've got a very large facility and you're processing enough animals, you just can't do it. And so your local butcher a lot of times can't do USDA, or if they can, it's only like on this set day when they've got a lot of livestock lined up, and it makes it difficult for the local farmer to be able to bring in their herds and get them processed so that they can sell the meat then to you as an individual, or sell the meat to the supermarket, or sell the meat to restaurants, and so on and so forth. The only way you can buy local meat and not have to worry about USDA processing is if you buy the entire cow yourself and then you take it to a processor. And a lot of times the processors you're taking it to have a day where the USDA comes in anyways. And so what the Primac would do is it would loosen up the cost of those USDA regulations and allow your local farmers, your local people to be able to more easily sell meat directly. So you don't have to go through a Chinese-owned meat processor in order to buy food. You can buy it directly from the farmer. The farmer could even sell to supermarkets within the area, so on and so forth. So that's what the Prime Act does. It really, if during COVID you remember that meat shortage we had, this really helps deal with that. Also, it helps put more money back in the farmers' pockets. The Prime Act is a very important piece of legislation that needs to hurry up and pass. So hopefully it does make it into that farm bill. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank you all so much for joining me. We'll see you back here next week. I hope you have a great rest of your day.